Worldfall, the Master's Daughter. Chapter 1. The Cold Room. Isobel Vane bent over a dead man's letter and could not make it lie quiet. By dusk it would have to go upstairs, entered in the docket book like every other paper in the League's keeping. She had the rest of the afternoon to decide what she would let it say. She worked by the north light of the letterer's castle, in the long, cold room where the League of the Merchant Cities kept the things that had to outlive the people who made them, and her breath stood in the air in front of the page. The letter had come to her sideways, as all the hard work came to her. A fellow of the house had carried it down to her table that morning, holding it out without quite meeting her eye. "The hand defeated the upstairs room," he said, to the window over her head. "When you have a fair reading, I'll carry it up." He would. It would be entered in the ledger over his name. That was the arrangement. No one had ever proposed it aloud, and everyone kept it. She was tall in a room where she was always seated, striking in a guild that preferred not to look at her, and the master's own daughter in a house that would die before it gave a woman a chair. So she had learned to do her real thinking where no one watched it happen, in plain letterer's grey, over pages other people would be praised for. This page was why rooms like hers existed. Isobel read the old dead Mysone better than anyone alive, a useless gift in the shut years and worth more than ships in the 1 year the sea opened, and this was that year. The letter came from the Contour, the League's trading house on the Mysoan shore, half warehouse and half embassy, the walled yard where Eastern merchants lived under their own law in a foreign port, kept alive across the closed decades by factors who sailed over young, married local and died foreign. It had come the slow way, no ship carrying anything in the closed years, passed hand to hand around the long northern ice, the better part of 10 years in the carrying, and the man who wrote it had been dust before it cleared the halfway portage. The last 3 of those years it had spent under this roof, shelved with the Contour's papers, entered upstairs as trade matters in a difficult hand, and left to keep. It would have kept another 80 years. But the storm was dying, and the masters wanted the Contour's whole file read before the fleet sailed, so the backlog had come down the stairs at last to the one table that could wake it. To read it was to hear a voice from the bottom of a well. She translated like a woman crossing rotten stairs, a word at a time, testing her weight. And so the question that troubled them when last the sea was open troubles them still, but louder, on account of the stamped books, which multiply faster than the temples can burn them. They no longer ask whether the calm is a mercy. They ask whether it is only a tide, with a cause a man might measure, and needing no priest to beg it. I do not know how it ends here. You will know on your side long before I do. Look to your own temples when the books come over. Isobel set down her pen and sat still while the cold worked through her sleeves. She understood exactly what these few stale lines were worth, and who would pay for them, and who would kill for them. A warning 10 years old was still 10 years of warning to whoever held it first. She had been raised to fear pages like this one. Her father had drilled the catalogue of the openings into her before she could write, prayer by prayer, the pale grain, the red fever, the foreign steel, every harmless-looking thing the sea had carried across and the world each one had quietly ended. The Vane house itself stood in that catalogue, brought down the year before her husband and his twin were born by a Western fashion in contracts that no one inside it understood until the warehouses stood in another man's name. She had grown up 4 streets from the 2 of them, and chosen between them for reasons she had told her father were rational. 2 winters married, she still heard the name Vane as borrowed, and was no longer sure which of them she had been punishing. There was one more item in the catalogue, a small one, that she had never said aloud because she could not make it mean anything. The openings did not keep their time. 80 years, the priests said, fixed as the bell. But the old dates in the letterer's own rolls did not quite hold the figure. 83, the once, then 81. And now this one, arriving a year and more early, in the wrong beast's year by every count the rolls kept, on a storm that twitched in its sleep instead of lying down. A handful of years stolen back across 3 centuries, and the theft quickening. Rounding, her father had called it, old men counting badly in the dark, and she had let it lie because she was a letterer's daughter, and knew that a pattern with no mechanism is only a shape you are frightened of. The undermaster's clerk came down the room at dusk with the docket book, collecting the day. The letter would be entered, summarized, and carried up. The masters would read her summary over their wine, under the fellow's name, and decide what the League should know and when. The clerk stood at her shoulder, blowing on his fingers. "Anything in the contour papers?" he said. "The masters are asking after the backlog." "Prices?" she said. "Wool and alum and a dead man's aches." Her pen went on in her fair round hand while she said it. Private letter. Contour of Mysos. Family and trade matters. Prices of wool and alum. The writer's health failing. All of it true. All of it on the page. She left the question lying where it lay, in a tongue no one upstairs would sit with long enough to break, and her pen did not so much as slow. When the clerk had gone, she did the other thing, the one she had been deciding all afternoon without admitting the decision was made. She took a half sheet of waste vellum, wrote out the question paragraph whole, the mysoan above and her own tongue below, folded it twice, and slid it into her sleeve against her wrist, where she would feel it for the rest of the evening like a splinter. The League owned the letter. No one owned the meaning. Her father had a word for people who thought that way, and the word was heretic, and he used it lovingly, and he was right. She walked home in the last of the light with the splinter against her wrist, through a city chewing on a crab boat story, a sail off the western capes, out of the very skirts of the storm, where no keel had any business being in a shut year. A dark hull, the crabber swore, dark as ironwood, her canvas patched like a beggar's coat, driving east through the weather's leavings as if her master knew something the calendar did not. Half the wharf said the man had been drunk. The other half stood at the harbour mouth till the light failed, watching the storm's grey line for her to show again. She did not hear Edmund come in. She never did. He moved through the world without disturbing it, which she had once mistaken, all the way through, for peace. He came home late from the diet, grey with some long day of his own, and over the cold supper he asked what the contour papers had held. "Prices," she said, "wool and alum and a dead man's aches." It came out of her smooth as a docket line, the second time that day, and the half-sheet lay against her wrist the whole time she said it. Below the castle and beyond the walls, the great bronze bell of the Temple of the Calm began to ring the hour. The slow note that had counted the city through every dynasty and every sacking, the note that any day now would ring in an opening and make the whole world lawful. And somewhere out past the harbour mouth, past the last grey teeth of the storm, a hull of ironwood was climbing the back of the final wave with 40 souls aboard, and a stamped book in her belly that called the bell a liar.